Jeff Ulbrich's attacking style defense promises to revolutionize the Falcons in 2025.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Now, if you do not know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. the Jolly Green Giant, a.k.a. the iron that sharpens the iron, a.k.a. Mr. AKA, and I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for almost 2 decades, formerly at FalcFans.com, RIP, still going strong in this illustrious podcast that I've been podcasting for over a decade. And I thank each and every one of you that go strong with me as everydayers. That means you make this podcast your first listen each and every day. And all you have to do to become an everydayer is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today's episode, we are joined by Cody Alexander, defensive guru from Match Quarters. He's going to break down this Jeff Ulbrich scheme, how it's going to marry with the Raheem Morris scheme, and what went wrong for both the Jets and Falcons defenses in 2024, and what may go right for both teams, or one team, obviously, both coaches in 2025. So without further ado, let's jump into that conversation with Cody Alexander right now. Welcome back, everyone. And we have an illustrious guest here today. He is Cody Alexander of MatchQuarters.com. He is here with us to break down what this new look, revamped, whatever you want to call it, Falcons defense is going to be in 2025. We had Cody on with us last year to break down the Raheem Morris, Jimmy Lake scheme. We'll talk about all the things that went wrong for the Falcons defense a little bit later in today's episode, but we'll start things with what's hopefully going to go right for the Falcons defense in 2025. But Cody, my friend, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So, Cody, when we talk about what this Falcons defense is going to look like in 2025, I guess our starting point is, what does a Jeff Ulbrich defense look like? What were sort of, in your eyes, sort of the defining characteristics for what Jeff Ulbrich ran as a defensive coordinator over the last 4 years, as well as interim head coach this past year with the New York Jets?
Yeah, basically he aligned with Saleh in kind of that transition from, I guess, people get mad at me when I call it the Shanahan defense because he already has an offense, but there's a very aesthetic feel to what Kyle Shanahan wants on defense. It's a 4 down. They want to run quarters and cover one. They don't do a lot of pressure. It's one of the least amount of pressures in the NFL. In fact, it's like a lot of times it's less than 20% of their plays have pressure. So he aligns pretty much, and that's what they did at the Jets. It was a lot of 4 down, a lot of quarters. In fact, they ran some of the highest amounts of quarters in the NFL, probably up until this year. They ran a little bit more cover 3 this year than normally, played a little bit more base than they normally did. So it was a 4-3. They had 3 linebackers, but that had to do with a lot Michael Carter, their nickel, getting hurt, doing some things like that. So to me, that's what an Ulbrich defense is. It's sound. It's gonna be reliant on getting pressure with the 4 up front, and then playing a mixed bag of cover 3 quarters and cover 1.
Yeah. So, Cody, I've long held the belief that, fronts don't matter as much in today's NFL because most defenses run sort of hybrid looks. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the exception to that is what you're referring to as this Shanahan, Saleh, now
right.
Ulbrich defense, which is like their front is not unique in the sense of we've never seen it in the NFL, but it's kind of unique relative to the rest of the league, who's sort of the hybridization, which is they have that 4 down front with the wide 9. Is that a fair assessment in your eyes to sort of look at this unit in this front as unique relative among NFL teams, and sort of what comes with it? What are some of the hallmarks of that style of front?
Yeah, it's weird because the wide 9 over front has been a staple of the NFL forever. But to your point, I was talking to a buddy of mine, his defense coordinator at a P4 school, and they're talking to a recruit, and it's between them and this other school. And he was asking, like, hey, what are the teams that are just playing like just 4 down? And it's really the 49ers, the Jets, the Cowboys. Under Quinn with the Commanders was playing 4 down again. There's just not a lot of teams running it. The Browns are another one. So it's like just guys that you just run 4 down. It's typically going to be 4 down, cover 3 defenses, 4 down, cover 1 defenses. Like it's that old school style. The Browns really struggled this year. The Colts got rid of Gus Bradley. We saw the collapse in the New York. I'm interested to see with Saleh back at the 49ers. Do they run it back? Do they try? What are they going to try to do? So it's a system that is very reliant on the front. And so you're correct in the sense that people have moved away from it. I mean, you go look at the Commanders last year. Frankie Louvu was an all-pro linebacker that moonlighted as an edge. So they would get into odd fronts. So 5-man fronts, they would get into these 5-man fronts by just walking him down, letting him rush from the edge. And so I think that's kind of the difference. That's why it's going to be very interesting to me how this fits in Atlanta, because you have Raheem Morris, who's very much loves a 5-man front, whether that's within their sub package, their 5-1 penny package, or in their actual base. And then now you're bringing in a guy that's really been a 4-down guy since being in New York.
Yeah. And, speaking, we'll get to how the blending it with Raheem Morris, but talking a little bit about the draft picks that the Falcons wound up selecting, particularly edge rushers James Pearce Jr. and Jalon Walker in round 1. Like I'm going through the film of James Pearce and I'm like, this guy looks like a classic sort of wide 9 guy. And it's understandable to me why the Falcons coveted him, with some of the reports coming out that suggested that they were willing to take him at 15, and then kind of were like, well, we can't pass up on a player like Jalon Walker. You mentioned sort of Frankie Louvu. We saw how the Falcons utilized Caden Ellis. The Falcons have mentioned that they plan on allowing Jalon Walker to kind of rush over guards, attacking that sort of A or B gap as a sort of stand-up rusher in certain situations, but have made it known that they want to start him out as the edge and get him comfortable playing more as an edge rusher than the sort of hybrid role that he played at Georgia this past year. I'm curious, from your perspective, how do these 2 rookies fit into sort of what the classic sort of Jeff Ulbrich defense, before we get into sort of how they hybridize or marry that with the Raheem Morris style of defense?
Well, in this defense, it's that classic, to steal from Schwartz, who's another 4-down guy with Cleveland, is we're going to rush the pass. We're going to stop the run as we rush to the quarterback, right? Like we'll tackle the ball carrier as we're trying to get to the quarterback and get sacked. So in this wide 9, a lot of times you're a boxer, meaning that you're going to try and box everything in. You're kicking everything back in. If it's a run and you get wide zone, I'm trying to stalemate at the top point, make that thing cut back. If it's any kind of gap scheme and they're trying to kick me out, so they're pulling linemen, trying to kick me out, I'm going to box that, meaning I'm going to hold my outside arm free. I'm going to put everything back. So even though it's a 4-down, it's not very much different mechanically for what you would do, what you would ask for an edge within the Raheem Morris system, where these guys are really dropping. It makes sense that they would say, hey, Walker's going to start at edge. We may kick him around, do some different things, because he needs to understand the mechanics of, one, how I line up at edge, and then dropping into coverage. That's something that's not Ulbrich didn't do very much in New York. They didn't run a lot of simulated pressures, meaning where we're going to blitz, but we'll blitz from off ball, but we'll still only rush forward, drop a defensive end on the other side. So to me, that will be something that it makes sense. Like, hey, we want these guys out. So it's not a bad extent. It's not really a thing of like, well, they don't fit in a 4-down. That really doesn't necessarily mean anything in this when they're playing so wide to begin with.
Okay. So let's get into sort of how we marry this Raheem Morris style defense with the Jeff Ulbrich defense with Cody Alexander as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. Now, there's nothing quite like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game, whether it's the buckets, the defensive stops. Every moment feels huge. It's electric in that arena. And with Gametime, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. But it's not just NBA playoff tickets, because with Gametime, whatever sport you're into, whether it's comedy, music, theater, whatever event is near you, you can get those last-minute deals, even when demand is sky high, because prices on the app go down the closer you get to your event. And those last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. And with their all-in prices, you see the total cost up front. What you see is what you get. No surprise fees at checkout, as well as what you see is what you get with those panoramic seat views. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime by downloading the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. The terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So Cody, I do try to chart the Falcons defense myself, but I tend to rely on, some of the data downloads that you put out there, for the other 31 teams, because, not watching that much film to understand what they're doing schematically, and sort of just looking at some of the trends that the Falcons have had this past year under Morris versus some of the trends that Ulbrich had, and see if you can kind of confirm this, sort of looking at the sort of hallmarks in terms of the things that the Jets majored in: a lot of man coverage, a lot of stunts, a lot more quarters in cover 4 that you're talking about. And then the Raheem Morris defense is more majoring in a lot more cover 3, a lot more simulated pressures. Or is that an accurate assessment of sort of what these defenses like to do? Are there other sort of things that you would also throw in there sort of stylistically?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think very much in the Jets circled around the fact that they had 2 really good corners. And so they played a lot of man coverage to keep it really easy for them. They wanted to kind of suffocate the run with their athletic linebackers and then just basically blitzing gaps, right, with their defensive line. Morris is very much different. They wanted, more of a 5-man running cover 3 from a 2-high shell is something that's really big within that system, because he comes from that Fangio adjacent tree where he worked in LA. Now he's with the Falcons. I think Jimmy Lake being there as DC probably leaned a little bit further into cover 3 than you normally would. To me, that's the biggest differences, is just kind of how they're getting to different things, because they both run cover 3. Well, the Jets aren't necessarily doing a lot of coverage disguise. The Falcons are trying to do coverage disguise as much as they possibly can. The Jets played quarters. Morris kind of played a little bit of quarters with LA that last year, just because their secondary was so bad. They play, carry that over. The Jets run a little bit of that cover 6 mentality, that quarter, half, quarter, but they're more traditional base. So they're more running it with a cover 2 side away from the nickel. So there's slight differences. The biggest difference to me is just front structure, like you said. Like, Raheem Morris, he's more of an odd front, 5-man front, where they really are trying to get to simulated pressures and drop those edges into coverage, whereas Ulbrich is more 4 down, and then we'll blitz with the backers, 5-man pressures. That's kind of how we get to it and play cover 1 behind it.
Okay. So when we're talking about mirroring this sort of defense, right? One of the things that Jeff Ulbrich said when he got hired was, when he was asked what type of defense, he said, we're going to be multiple, right? And so it feels like they're going to kind of blend some of the stuff he did with the Jets. They're going to blend some of the stuff that Raheem Morris has traditionally done over the last couple of years, as you just discussed. Sort of, what does that sort of multiplicity look like? What is that sort of bringing together? Are there any things that you sort of think that, for Falcon fans watching and listening right now, that we should be paying special attention to when it comes to blending those 2 philosophies?
Well, first, let's do a little bit of a history lesson between these 2 guys. Raheem Morris came up under, Quinn when Quinn was here for Atlanta. Ulbrich is actually worked for Jim Mora. That name is important because the Fangio system that we know today comes from the '89 Saints, and you can go and look at that coaching tree and how much. So these guys speak the same language. Ulbrich knows the Fangio system. He's worked under Saleh, who comes from kind of that Carroll tree. Morris has worked under the Fangio system, has come under and has also worked under the Carroll tree. So there's a lot of commonality. They're getting to things differently. I think you're still going to keep a 2-high shell. I don't think that's going away in the NFL. I think this Fangio adjacent crew is kind of that. I think that's pretty much entrenched. Where I see the multiple, and really multiple is a coach speak term. Coaches say it every time. We're going to be multiple. Everybody's multiple. What ends up happening is, what can my players actually do? How can I teach this? I think you're not going to see much of a deviation. I think you see more quarters. I think you see more cover 3, and I think you see more cover 1. I think what you're going to see a little bit is what happened with the Broncos, where you have Vance Joseph trying to run Fangio. It didn't work. What do? Let's clean it up. We can keep the 5-man front stuff. Let's play a little bit more cover 1. We're going to get back into the blitz-centric stuff that I enjoy doing as a DC. I think if Morris really lets Ulbrich call it, I think that we see we'll see the 5-1 stuff, but I think coverages tend to be a little bit more simpler, where we're not necessarily playing a bunch of different rotations. We're playing cover 3, we're playing cover 1, we're playing quarters, but we're changing the front structure. I think that's where that multiple part comes into play.
Yeah, we'll get to later what went wrong for the Falcons in 2024 defensively, but I thought one of the things that went right for the Falcons defensively in the second half, they started being a little bit more aggressive, playing a little bit more press, playing a little bit more man coverage, and it seemed like the defense, for the most part, outside of a couple of games, I'm thinking of that Vikings game, the defense responded pretty well to that, not only with the pass rush and the coverage on the back end. Do you feel like if the Falcons are going to embrace a little bit more of that sort of press man coverage scheme, and no slight to AJ Terrell and Mike Hughes, but I don't know if most people would consider them on the same level as Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed at their peaks. Maybe you could, since those two guys didn't necessarily have the best 2024 seasons that we've seen them have, you could maybe say they've closed the gap a little bit on that. But do you feel like that sort of move, if that's the move that the Falcons may be making, will benefit this secondary in particular?
Well, I think AJ Terrell, the problem with Terrell's really been that, he's the only one on the field that's going to press. We're going to press him 60% of the time, like we did the year before, right? And then before Morris. And so then now we're in a little bit more passive situation. Even then, AJ Terrell has consistently been right there on the fringe of kind of that he's a number one corner. And I think a lot of people view him as a number one corner at this point in his career. He is on the Falcons. If he were anywhere else, I don't think he's Sauce Gardner. I don't even think he's DJ Reed. I think making it a little bit, having a better plan in the secondary, not just playing cover 3, not just playing cover 1, but having multiple things to do, I think can really help him out. He tends to do better in zone, which again, I think playing under Morris, you've seen him play a little bit better. I do think with, you're going to have to answer questions of, Mike Hughes, is he, how good can Mike Hughes be? Can he be that number 2 guy that we really need out there? Again, this is another corner that's kind of opposite. He plays better in man situations than he does in zone situations. So you got to find that equilibrium. And to me, I think it all starts with Bates setting everything up, getting him going, and then having a complementary person next to him that understands and can play and match that, and let him kind of be kind of almost this freelance player, if that makes sense.
Last question before we get into sort of revisiting 2024 for both the Jets and Falcons, but kind of piggybacks on that point. I thought watching the film with the Falcons, they were really vulnerable to the run up the middle, particularly gap runs and power runs, anything between the tackles. I think that 5-man front that you're talking about, that penny front, was really good at sort of shutting down sort of outside runs. Yeah. I think from, again, not doing a deep dive on the Jet stuff, but it seemed like their defense, because of that wide 9, as well as you mentioned earlier, does a really good job of defending the outside run, but maybe they were a little bit more vulnerable to the inside run. I'm curious, that's been a lingering question that we've had since the draft, thinking that the Falcons were going to go out there and get more of a wide body nose tackle, 1 tech, but they didn't do that in the draft. They haven't done that this offseason. I know that's one thing that the Jets defense didn't necessarily really utilize a whole lot the last couple of years, as we see across the league, that sort of 1 technique nose tackle. Do you feel like what is that about? Is that a true statement? And is one of the vulnerabilities of this style of front, does it make them a little bit more limited against the inside run? Or is that just, more of a personnel issue than a scheme issue?
I think it's philosophy, right? And both of them, Morris came from LA, where they had a very active front, very light front. I mean, even their true nose, what Bobby Brown was not really a nose. He was kind of a 3 technique moonlighting as a head up, and they moved him around a lot. So to me, you go to, Ulbrich. Well, they have Quinnen Williams, which is great. So they have a guy that can play nose, but he's very active. He can rush the passer. But what they really want in that system is everybody kind of penetrating quickly, right? We're going to get it. We're going to demand double teams. If you climb too fast to the second level, so you get to our linebackers, great, but we're going to win the one-on-one because our guys, it basically turns into a pass rush. The wide 9 really blocks these wide zones. The 5-man front that you highlighted really blocks these wide zones. I go to the Chargers last year, who decided, hey, we're going to just play with 2 big noses, right? Tart and Poona Ford. We're just going to play in this. Well, the problem that happens is you lose interior pass rush. And so now, okay, you're in your nickel. You have these 2 guys that are demanding a bunch of double teams, but we're not really getting the linebacker play that we want. And we're also not getting any kind of push up the middle. The thing to remember about pass rush, and I know we're talking about run, but everything is predicated off pass in the NFL, is that your interior offensive line is really the most important to a quarterback because that's pressure in his face. So that actually gives you the depth of the pocket. The tackles are actually the width. And so it all works together in this play action centric early down NFL system that we have, where you need to be able to pass rush it at any moment. And efficiency wise, if you're running inside the tackles, it's much less efficient than if you were to run wide zone, you're running play action passes, or you're even just passing in general. So defensive coordinators in the NFL are pretty much okay with allowing every once in a while you get a 5-6 yarder because they figure, well, in second down, you'll just throw the ball. And now we're just back into playing that cat and mouse game. So what happens, and like you highlighted, is when it's just or like to stay in your division, the Panthers, when you just can't stop the run, period. Right. And then it just doesn't matter because then everything compounds on each other on early downs. You can't stop. You can't get these, second and longs that turn into third and longs. You're basically constantly behind the chains and you're grasping at straws, which is another reason why you probably saw an uptick in the back half with pressure, is because you have to manufacture it some way. So Caden Ellis blitzing, whether it's on an early down or not, is now we have to manufacture pressure because we can't.
Okay. Well, let's get more into sort of where things went wrong for each of these teams, the Jets and Falcons, in 2024, as another way to sort of attack, where are the areas that have the most potential for improvement. And we'll break that down as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. And with Upwork, you're getting that expertise, right? You can find specialized freelancers, marketing, development, design, and more experts that are ready to help take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talents across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, you'll be hit with multiple, just like the Jeff Ulbrich scheme, qualified candidates to choose from. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. So, Cody, let's start with the Falcons. What went wrong for the 1 year of Jimmy Lake that we had in Atlanta?
Yeah, I thought Jimmy Lake was an interesting hire. I mean, I understand the bringing him over from the Rams. He knew the system, everything. But Jimmy Lake has kind of been very much of a cover 3 guy, more standard, collegiate guy. I didn't think it necessarily meshed well with what they were trying to do. And you kind of saw that where you basically got your coverage funneled down to, we run cover 3 and that's about it. We don't run very much cover 1 at all. We don't run anything else. And then obviously, because we're Fangio system, we have our cover 6 stuff. And I think what ends up happening is you got no pass rush and you got no run stopping ability. Your linebackers played pretty well. Your cornerbacks were okay. And then your safety play was decent because of Bates. And so what ends up happening is that you really can't stop anybody. You can't stop the bleeding. And so that then just kind of gets in the way, and you end up with a poor performance on defense.
Now, with the Jets, what was your assessment of why that unit went from one of the best in the NFL to middling, I guess is the way that most would describe it last year?
Yeah, I think the injury bug hit them pretty hard. Their defensive ends, which were supposed to be a strength, didn't really produce. So here we have an offense a defense that's a wide nine defense, heavy into let's make sure, we got to get pressure. And then all of a sudden we're just not getting pressure. And I think outside of Quinnen Williams, even inside, it was just kind of a revolving door. Javon Kinlaw looks like he should be really good inside. He gets pushed around against the run game. And, if it's not a pass rush, how hard is he playing? Defensive ends, they're really talented. They got some first round guys, but then, you're just not getting that sack production. Linebacker was pretty good. Corner was good. But you lose Michael Carter. I think so. Again, performance-wise, player personnel-wise, there was a lot of just disjointedness just because of you have injuries at certain spots, guys kind of falling off, guys not producing. Then on top of that, you have the whole circus that was last year. I go back to even when you had Evero, who's with the Panthers. He was having such a good years in Denver, and then the offense, right? It's the ineptitude of the offense catches up. Like they were the best defense the first half of the year, and then it just kind of sat, And so I think a lot of that too with the Jets is the defense is constantly trying. We're on the field all the time. We're trying to get there. So then people don't understand. The jump from coordinator to head coach is not just a step. That is a completely different, we're now like in a different stratosphere that, you can be a really good defensive coordinator. Spagnuolo is a great example of that. You get put in a head coaching role and just, it all falls apart. So to me, I think it was twofold. Things going on outside and in the organization, in the front office. And then obviously on Sunday, just that constant fatigue, injury, holding on because the offense can't score any points.
Okay. Now, one of the things I observed watching the Jets, I felt like they really felt the loss of guys like John Franklin Myers and Jermaine Johnson in those edge rush roles, with going to Will McDonald, having to rely a lot more on Michael Clemens, two guys that I think they probably envisioned having more, situational roles in their defense, and then had to be kind of sort of full-time guys. And I think that led to that drop off for their defense in a lot of ways, where in the two previous years when they were one of the best defenses in the league, they did an excellent job controlling the line of scrimmage with that 4-man front. And then that took a step back. And then it felt like, for me at least, a sort of domino effect. Do you feel like that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, we saw the same thing happen with the 49ers. You have attrition on the front line. You don't have your rotation anymore. Those guys aren't getting fresh, and so therefore they're not hitting, or they're young and they just haven't really developed yet, or maybe they're not going to develop yet. So I think it's twofold in that, is that they lost depth, and then they were relying on guys who they thought were going to hit, and then they just had the mess that they had last year, and it just didn't work out.
Well, speaking of relying on guys that they think is going to hit, the Falcons are relying on a lot of young players up front that they expect to hit. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, looking at some of the early round picks that they're going to be heavily relying on this upcoming season, both at edge rusher, including the 2 first round picks this year, as well as at the defensive tackle position. In your assessment, 4 months before the season starts, how do you think it's going to fare for the Falcons?
I think if they can get the edge situation, they went out and got 2 young edges that can do different things. I think James Pearce is more of your pure edge rusher in the sense that he's going to stand up, he's going to rush the passer. I think Jalon Walker is your hybrid guy that can do a bunch of different things. You have Caden Ellis, who I think now, you have to have a hybrid off-ball linebacker now, where he can play off ball as a traditional linebacker. But then if we need him to, let's say we're in a nickel, right? We're in our 4-2-5 look, but we want to give something different to the offense. We can drop him down, kick somebody inside. And then now we're giving a completely different presentation. And so our penny package translates into a bunch of different things. We see the Chiefs do this all the time. The Commanders do this really well with Lou, who, as I mentioned earlier, I think really it's going to come down to, can Xavier Watts play full-time? Can he be that starting guy that you want? I think people were really high on him. I think he plays deep mostly. If you've ever seen him live standing next to him, he looks almost like a corner. I think he's a really athletic guy that frees Bates to do a lot of different things. I think the sleeper in all of this is Billy Bowman. Billy Bowman screams nickel. And he's the guy, and I've mentioned this to several people, like, who's the Brian Branch of this class? Who's the guy who we look up? Drew Phillips for the Giants, who kind of fell out of that first round. And then we look up and it's like, well, this guy's basically an all-pro nickel. How could we have let him slide that far? I don't think Billy Bowman's Branch in the sense that he can play at a high level deep and a high level at nickel, but he is a player who's a ball hawk. He's a coach's son. I'm from the DFW area. He's from Denton Ryan, which is North Texas. So familiar with him, his play. He played at OU, played nickel. I think, to me, if there's a sleeper in this that you look up 12 months from now and you're like, wow, we really got that position correct. I think that even though you have a guy in, D. Alford who is okay, I think if you can have a presence and a guy that can do a bunch of different things, he can play deep, he can play at the nickel, he can play man, he can play zone, and he's a ball hawk. That is the modern nickel. That's what we're talking. We just saw Jalen Petrie just got paid. Kyler Gordon just got paid. Those guys make money. Even Jordan Lewis got paid by the Jaguars to be a man coverage guy. So to me, I think that's the key. The edges will come. Your pass rush can't get any worse. It cannot. I feel like this is like, it's like we keep saying this, right? It can't get any worse. It can't get any worse. And then it just kind of fizzles out. But I really think with these young players, it can't get any worse. And then that's kind of if Xavier Watts and if Billy Bowman can sneak in there and maybe be a starter and kind of be that X factor, I think that this is a defense that can really make a jump and make some noise, because you don't have to be that good in the South. You know what I mean? Like, if you can win 10 games in the South, you're in the playoffs. So I think that that's something to look at when you look projecting for next year.
Okay. Well, Cody, I always appreciate your insight into these defensive issues, breaking it down so that myself and the listeners can better understand some of this stuff. I know I'll be referring to a lot of the things that you said in this episode on future episodes all summer long. Let the people know some of the other stuff that you're working on, as well as where they can find your stuff.
Yeah, matchquarters.com is kind of my home hub. If you want to find anything from social links to any article or clinic that I've done, that's a great place to start. And then I also am the head of football ops for Field Vision, which is an AI and machine learning data analysis company. We have our own app. You can download it for free right now in the App Store. We were 60% better than Vegas last year overall throughout the entire year. You can use it for fantasy. You can do a bunch of different things. It's got data in there too. We just launched Field Vision Pro, which is our data platform that does data viz as well. So I've got a lot of things going on, all focused on ball though. So I appreciate you having me on and letting me talk defense.
Okay. Well, we'll see if the Falcons make some big blockbuster moves in August like they did last summer. And then we'll have you back on to see how it hopefully changes the defense for the better, though unfortunately the Simmons and Judon moves didn't quite have the impact that we thought they would.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
So, guys, that's going to do it for us here. Tomorrow we'll be, of course, well, maybe we won't. We'll see. Maybe we won't be joined by Jarvis Davis as usual at the end of the week. So we'll see what's what on that front. Jarvis has some events going on. So I guess I'll have to check to see if Jarvis will be available for the pod tomorrow. But if not, then we'll talk about stuff. We always keep it interesting here on the podcast. Got plenty of topics that I want to dive into when it comes to the 2025 season, whether it's the offense, whether it's the defense. So we'll figure out something interesting to talk about. So make sure you continue to make Locked On Falcons your first listen by subscribing and following for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And of course, for your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, Joe Marino, Kyle Krabs, giving you the lowdown on how to build your teams correctly, post-draft, preseason, all that and more. It's all available on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every